Hello, I'm Amy Lemire. The following video is a portion of a paid presentation I delivered called Finding More Joy in Your Journey at a Center for Spiritual Living. The content is based on my personal stories, my life experiences, but also on a course I am certified to teach called Habit Finder, which is based on 6 key thought habits, one of them being finding more joy in your journey. The audience are adults that are looking for more motivation, inspiration, fulfillment, and life happiness, but often find that daily life and stress can keep us stuck. Thank you for taking your time to review this video as part of my Certified Speaking Professional application.
Now, as I was preparing for this talk today, I want to share with you that the outcome of this is for you to come away from this with at least 3 ideas of how you can find more joy in your journey, not tomorrow, not next week, today. And at the end of this talk today, I'll start out by telling a little bit about myself and my story, as Tracy mentioned. And then as we go forward, I'm going to also give you the 6 secrets to finding more joy in your journey. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to give all of you a gift for being here. So again, whether you're in the room or on the live stream, this applies to everybody. So as I was getting ready for this talk, I went to Google and I just typed in the word joy. And as you can imagine, a lot of things came up. But the first thing I noticed was the definition of joy, and the joy is a feeling of great pleasure or happiness. And then right underneath that came up an advertisement for Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of my favorite sayings in my life is, joy is our birthright. And so I happened to just read the 12 steps, and I realized how much the commitment to joy in our journey is part of that group's mission. And so I really felt inspired. But then I asked myself, if joy seems like such a simple element, why is it so difficult to achieve? It's no secret that some of us in this room right now might be feeling a lot of joy in our lives, but some of us might not be feeling that. So I want to really start out with 3 themes to think about. The first theme I'd like you to think about is that every one of us in this room has life experiences. Some of those life experiences leave us feeling stuck, humiliated, burned out, and then some of those experiences leave us feeling really successful and joyful. And the second thing I'd like you to consider is that we all have thought habits. Some of those thought habits support our success, and then some of those thought habits will also sabotage us. And the last thing to think about is that we're all human and we all lose our way. We get away from being the best version of ourselves. And as I saw that and I thought more about it, I want to share some really compelling insights with all of you. Number 1, this is a global issue because 80% of us stay in jobs we don't like for the health care or the insurance benefits. Been there before. Many years, I just heard. The second thing I'd like you to consider is that according to Inc. magazine, 70% of us admit to feeling distracted on a daily basis. And out of all of you that set New Year's resolutions, only 8 of us keep those resolutions by the end of February. Now, the last piece of information I'm going to share is straight out of the course I teach, which I found at Habit Finder. I found this to be very interesting and eye-opening, is that 95% of all geriatric illness has been attributed to a lifetime of catastrophic thinking, meaning focusing on the what-ifs and the negativity. Now, there is good news that we can shift our thought habits, and that's part of what my talk will be based on today is 3 pivotal moments. First, I'll share about how I came face-to-face with my joy in the journey, and then we'll go into those secrets and then the gift at the end. So the first thing I'll share with you is that have you heard that saying, it all comes full circle? Anyone? Okay, yeah. It all comes full circle. I went to high school right across the street at Parkway North. I used to go to Thornhill Library. I got married to my first husband right here. believe it or not, go back to 1994. And then I was talking to Tom before the service that we started a Toastmasters club here many years ago. And I stood up here as the first place I practiced speaking in front of people. But the story goes back even further than all of that. It started when I got this name called Amy Joy from a donut shop near my home in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I was born. So my father used to call me Amy Joy, and I had a really great childhood. You know, everything was wonderful. I had great parents. My mom had always been in sales. My father was also in sales, and he had his own business, but mom was always into self-development. So to say that I had a great family upbringing is an understatement. But a lot of that changed when I turned 9 years old for a short moment in time. So my family was leaving Six Flags here in the metropolitan area in Eureka, Missouri. Back then it was Six Flags Mid-America. Okay, now it's just Six Flags St. Louis. But as we were leaving, my mom was doing the best to avoid all the traffic that was trying to leave at the same time. It was pretty busy in the evening, and so she was on the outer road of 44. And I was with my two sisters, my brother, and some kids from next door to us in the neighborhood. And as my mom was driving, someone that had had too many drinks was behind the wheel. And he came straight at us. And so my mom did the best thing she could do in that split second and turned the car and avoided a head-on collision, which honestly probably would have killed all of us. And I'll tell all of you, I don't remember what happened because I blacked out, but I do remember waking up in a hospital bed, not sure why I was there, and I was told what happened, and I was told I was in surgery for 8 hours. I was told I had over 500 stitches in my face. I was told if I survived, my family had been warned that I might not walk again, see again, hear again, and to say that I'm here is a miracle, is an understatement, that it's a miracle that I'm standing here right now. So that was... I know, here's some claps, thank you. But I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. But what I'll tell you from all of that experience is something really amazing came out of that experience, and it's this right here. My grandmother, Meme, gave me this book, and it was called Determination. It was a story of Helen Keller. And I remember, you know, determination at age 9 is a really big word, okay? So I remember reading this. And as I read it, it made sense. I started realizing at age 9 that it's this thought of having courage in spite of adversity, no matter what happens, that we can overcome anything. So I read the book and I started really believing that I could be determined also at that age, as I went through a lot of reconstructive and cosmetic surgeries on my face over the years. But fast forward to 2000, not 2000, I'm not there yet. When I was 19, let's just say, it was the 80s, okay? One more story first. But when I was going to school at the University of Kansas, my friend Matt invited me to a leadership evening in Kansas City, and it was this group called LifeSpring. And you know, it's funny because we sat there and we looked around. We're like, you know, we're the youngest people here, and let's sign up for this seminar. And it was all about your beliefs and how you could be anything you want to be and possibilities. And we signed up for it, and I really didn't think much of it. But I think that workshop was the equivalent of about 20 years of therapy, because it was the first time in my life I realized it's not what's here or here that matters. It's what's here that's the most important thing. And it got me to see that we all have beliefs and we have stories and we have things that hold us back. And what I came away from that was a real big appreciation for self-development and human potential. So fast forward one more time, the last story happened just back in 2018. And I think this is one of the biggest ones. I was invited to a leadership evening at some women's house in Chicago where I was living at the time, and they were both in Mary Kay, and they said, "We're not here to sell you Mary Kay. Okay, this is a leadership evening." And as I went to it, I just noticed something was different about them. They were happy. They had it all put together. They dressed the part. They looked the part. They felt the part. And I didn't know what it was that they had, but I wanted it. Because you see, at that point in my life, I wasn't happy, I wasn't sad, but I knew something was missing. You see, I've been living in Chicago for 14 years, and I had a secret. I wanted to move back to St. Louis. As I always say, I was tired of the tolls, the traffic, and the taxes. But there was more to that story than that. When my coach, Amy, went through my Habit Finder assessment, I found out very quickly that I had been living my life in this obligation cycle called I have to, I should, and I must. And once I became aware of that story, I began to look in the mirror and realize that I was pretty unhappy in the relationship I had been in for, at that point, 14 years. And it was time to step up and be honest with myself about it. Now, fast forward to the end of that workshop, and not only did it change my life, but I thought, I need to teach this to other people. Because I made the decision to leave the marriage. I made the decision to move back to St. Louis. I had my best income year ever. And I got certified in this course called Habit Finder. But there's a lot more to the story than that, and it is what I'll be sharing as I go forward here. So what I'm going to share with you is a culmination of some of the teachings of Habit Finder called Joy in the Journey, which is one of the 6 steps of happiness and being the best version of yourself. But the other thing I'll teach you about is how my life experiences and also life experiences of other people I've worked with have gotten me to get back in touch with my joy in the journey. So the first thing that I'd like you to think about, and if you're anybody that has a notebook or wants to take notes, I'm going to follow the acronym BELIEF, okay, going back to my seminar, LifeSpring, but it's BELIEF. I'm going to follow that as I give these tips. The first thing to think about is beware of boundaries, the cycle of obligation. What are boundaries and what is the cycle of obligation? Now, I remember when I grew up here in St. Louis, I lived in Old Farm Estates, and our house had a fence. It was, a typical fence you see in a subdivision, and I remember that fence was there to, keep dogs out or strangers or other people that might come in. But something that happens with boundaries is we experience trauma. We sometimes start to develop this belief that I need to take care of other people because I feel less than, or I feel like there's something wrong with me. And so if you think about those fences that slowly get collapsed. One of my favorite authors that I follow, and I recommend anybody in this room, if you have an issue with boundaries, to read a really great book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. He also wrote another really great book called Necessary Endings. And it's really about taking a look and being aware of not just boundaries, but also that cycle of obligation. And how do you know if you're on a cycle of obligation? I'll ask you a simple question. Is there anything in your life right now where you say, I have to, I should, and I must? One example I'll give of that is I have a friend that told me she wanted to release 30 pounds. And her story was, I have to go to the gym, I have to lose this weight, I need to make some big changes. And she was very, very upset and emotional about it because she couldn't get it to happen. And she finally started saying, I get to, I choose to, and I want to. And she started saying, I get to go to the gym, I choose to eat healthy, and I saw her in a webinar like a week or two ago, and she looked different, and she'd already lost about 10 pounds just by changing that to I get to, I choose to, and I want to about her health choices. The second thing that I'd like you to think about here is that once you own your boundaries, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and your personal power will rise. I can say that from my own personal experience. Because when you own your boundaries, you get to live life on your own terms versus somebody else's agenda. And ask yourself this, is it a job? Is it a habit? Is it a relationship? Is there something that you might be going through right now that maybe you could start saying, I get to, I choose to, and I want to, and maybe that job, the relationship, or whatever it might be, isn't part of your I get to, I choose to, I want to anymore. The second part of getting joy in your journey is to eliminate expectations. Expectations in my course are the #1 killer of joy in the journey. And what is an expectation? That's when I say something like, my life looks like this, but it really should look like that instead. Now, I remember this when I first moved back to St. Louis. I had this most amazing house in Chicago, 3,300 square feet, beautiful new construction, vaulted ceilings, looked out into this really amazing wetland, freshly painted, brand new furniture. And then I moved back to St. Louis and I rented a house that was built in 1967, 1,500 square feet. And I would sit there in judgment about it. But then I stopped myself. I started taking on a new habit. I got a gratitude journal. And what I would do is every day I would write down at least 10 things I'm grateful for. And I did that this morning. I make it a practice every day. Even if I forget in the morning, I do it sometime in the day. But I started to appreciate. I started to exchange those expectations for appreciation. And when I did that, everything started changing. I began to appreciate. I finally made my dream come true moving back to St. Louis. I love Chicago. Anybody out there that's from Chicago, it will always be my second home. But I felt a calling to come back here. And once I started doing that more and more frequently, I began to really appreciate so much more. And the other thing I think that holds us back with joy in the journey is we look at stuff. We look at our cars, our houses, our clothes, and we think that's what's going to make us happy. I remember being in sales all those years, and I spent probably too many years to count, but about 27 years in sales. And, I had my nails done. I always had my hair done. I drove the company car. Everything on the outside was perfect. But on the inside, I would still think about the sale I lost last week or an argument I had with somebody spinning around in my head like a CD. So really start being aware of, am I putting unrealistic expectations on myself that are holding back my personal happiness? Let go of secrets. What are your secrets? Secrets are the things that we do that we don't want other people to know about. It's the things that we wouldn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper. And for a long time, I can think of a lot of secrets I've had in my life, but one I remember is I used to smoke cigarettes. I'm not ashamed to say that. There may be some of you that smoke, and I'm not against it, but for me, it must have been something I didn't feel good about because when I was in sales, working for a payroll company here in St. Louis, I would sneak outside my car and my boss, she was always really, perfect and, went to a Catholic school and had the perfect hair and everything else. And I always felt really dirty and ashamed that I wanted to grab a cigarette. But I would get off my sales calls and go outside and, light up and, feel a little bit better for a few minutes. But then, I started studying. I went to a smoking cessation course. And what I found out is that a lot of these behaviors we do because we are in denial about something else. I was in denial that I didn't like that job very much. But I was also in denial that I wasn't taking enough downtime and I wasn't managing my stress very well. So what I did instead is, I started going to the gym more often. I started taking better care of myself. I started doing more things to deal with my stress in a healthy way. But what are your secrets? We all do things to anesthetize ourselves. Is it Netflix? Is it gambling? Is it I got to have that glass of wine when I get home from work? Is it other things we might do? And please understand, I'm not coming from a place of judgment or good or bad or right or wrong. The only person that those secrets hurt is ourself. And I remember the other secret of not being happy in a marriage. It was time to have the talk of, I'm not happy and you're not happy. Why are we doing this, right? Maybe there's something that you need to talk to somebody else about. The next is, I choose me and I am enough. I choose me and I am enough. Sometimes events of the past can leave us feeling less than or not good enough. But what I want to invite all of you to remember is that every single one of us has gifts. We all have unique qualities that nobody else has. I remember when I was in sales, one of the things that would come up quite often is comparison. And for anybody out there that's been in sales, that's probably I don't know why, the toughest profession I got into. I always say I got that gene from my mom. But I sold for quite a long time, but they would put out these stack rankings every month. And you'd see, you were either at the top or you were at the bottom, and there were some times I was at the bottom, and I would get really angry and frustrated, and I would feel like a loser. But then I started doing something different. I started calling the people that were at the top of that list, and I started asking them, what are you doing? How did you win that big sale? What's tell me your story. And the funniest thing about it is that not one of them said, I don't want to talk to you. They were actually excited to tell their stories. So what I started doing is I started doing what they were doing. And another thing I started doing is I started asking myself, what are 3 things that make me different from everybody on that roster? And I thought, well, you know what? I've got a lot of passion. I have the woo factor, winning others over, which is great to have when you're in sales. And I also had a belief that I am going to deliver 100 times more service than anybody else on the team to every one of my customers. I'm going to bring them more value and more appreciation than anybody could ever imagine. And I made that my mantra. And I would drive around between my sales appointments and listen to Tony Robbins and my favorite music. And, I've got this morning ritual where I would always work out or do something every day to get myself in the right place to get in front of those customers. And I started becoming a top performer, which eventually led to my career in sales training. So that was all from saying I choose me and I choose my unique gifts instead of comparing myself to somebody else. E stands for enjoy the now versus too busy to be. Now, I'll admit to all of you, this is something I still work on every day of my life. I'm a very busy person, but the problem that can come in is when we use being busy as escape. And I did that for a really long time. When I was in sales, I covered a couple states, and I would travel, and I call it travel and trophies. Even in my office today, I have all these plaques and awards I've won, and I did that as a way to, I will feel better about myself if I just escape and stay busy, and I will also feel better about myself if I achieve something. So if you call yourself an overachiever, a type A, there's nothing wrong with that. That's really awesome. But just being aware that I'm living my life in the now also means I'm not thinking about the past with guilt and shame. I'm choosing my life experiences to be my greatest gift. And I'm also not worried about the future. Being in the now means I'm appreciating the moment. I'm appreciating this Sunday morning and being in this amazing community right now is part of that, right? That's being in the now. The last is F, and that stands for finding meaning and purpose. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the 2 millimeters, no matter what's going on. Trust the process. There is a divine order in our universe. And the last story I'll share with all of you, again, 2019 is really when I had it was my fireworks blowout year. It was when I pressed that reset button of my life. And I remember so many things that year, but there were a couple things that happened that I'll share with you where I really learned that I had to stop and find the meaning and appreciate what was going on. And one of my favorite sayings is, today I will be master of my emotions, which is part of what I teach in this book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. There are 10 amazing scrolls that you can read, which I base a lot of what I'm talking about on. But one of the events happened, it was 2019, it was spring, and I got the house sold, we're packing up the house, the divorce is over, I'm like, I can finally just take a deep breath. Well, I go to a Tony Robbins seminar in Los Angeles, and then I get the email, you're checking your phone before you go into the event. It's from Human Resources. Turns out this division I was in of Qualcomm, which it was a medical division, they decided to spin it off, meaning they decided to fire and let go of the entire leadership team. And at that point, I was a global director of sales training. And I remember reading that and just feeling a sense of disbelief. I'm like, really? And I was just on that point of going into a pity party and being angry or upset about it. And I stopped myself and I said, you know what? God, there's got to be a reason that all of this is happening right now. And I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to trust that there's something really great that's happening. And I did. And the funny thing about it is next day I got an email again, talked to HR, ended up getting a package that allowed me to take 6 months off, move back to St. Louis, start my Habit Finder coaching business, and it was one of the best summers of my life. In conclusion, remember that the best version of ourself is possible. The first step is to really think about your thought habits. My mission is to shift the thought habits of 1 million people. I know that's a really big goal, but I feel called to do that. And the other part of it I want to remind all of you is that it takes 3 things to change. I always say it's the triple A. It takes awareness, it takes action, it takes accountability. Awareness is where I am right now. Am I excited about what's going on in my life, or am I stuck? Okay, and there's no good, bad, right, or wrong. Wherever you are is where you are. One way that you can assess that is you can take the Habit Finder assessment. I think we're going to put the link up on the screen. Thank you. And the other way that that you can move forward with that is to take action. Maybe your action is, I'm going to come to this service every Sunday. Maybe your action is, I'm going to hire a coach. Maybe your action is, I'm going to go to a support group. Maybe your action is, I'm going to go to therapy that I've been putting off. Everybody's action can be different. And the last is accountability. I will tell all of you that I wouldn't have made half the changes I've made in my life had I not invested in self-development. I know I've spent over 6 figures on self-development myself, but I've had coaches, I've had groups. I've just made this a habit in my life, and it's what has allowed me to stand here today and tell my story. Thank you all for being here today with me. It's been a joy to share my story with you, and I thank you so much.